In a time of darkness, you are in search of a light that will help guide you to the end of the path. At obligatoryknowledge.com, our goal is to pass that light on to you so that it may guide you all the way to paradise, insha'Allah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rasulillah. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla, wa anta ya hayyu ya qayyum, taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. I start off by praising Allah, Lord of the worlds, and I humbly ask Him to raise the rank of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, alayhi, sallam, and protect his nation from that which he fears for it. And thereafter, brothers and sisters, insha'Allah ta'ala, we will start the 7th hadith of the 40 hadiths of Imam an-Nawawiyy Muhyiddin Yahya ibn Sharaf rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. May Allah have mercy on him. So we reached this far, alhamdulillah, we've benefited greatly, and we have yet another beautiful hadith that we will explain insha'Allah. I will start off with the Arabic and then the English, and then we will go to the explanation as we usually do bi'idhnillah. قال محي الدين يحيى بن شرف النووي رحمة الله تعالى عليه الحديث السابع عن أبي رقية تميم بن أوس ad-Dari رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الدين النصيحة قلنا لمن؟ قال لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم رواه مسلم. The 7th hadith from the route of Abu Ruqayyah Tamim ibn Aws ad-Dari, may Allah accept his deeds, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Nasihah is an integral part of the religion. We said, to whom? He said, to Allah, His book, His messenger, the leaders of the Muslims and the lay people among them, narrated by Muslim. Now some scholars said about this hadith that it is ahadu arba'id-din, that it equals 1/4 of the religion. And they said this to show the importance of this hadith and of the meanings that it contains. Right? So some of the scholars said that 1/4 of the religion is based on this hadith. And they said that to show and illustrate its significance and its importance and the influence of this hadith. Yani, what does this mean? That this is a hadith that we should pay attention to and we should try to implement it. In a brief biography of the narrator of this hadith, who is Tamim ibn Aws ad-Dari, his kunya is Abu Ruqayyah, as is evident in the hadith. We mentioned his name, Abu Ruqayyah. And this is his kunya, and he is given this kunya because he had a daughter named Ruqayyah. So he is called Abu Ruqayyah. And this is the same companion who narrated the hadith about the Dajjal. And insha'Allah we will get to that and touch on that soon, bi'idhnillah. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam then after narrated the story of the Dajjal from Tamim ibn Aws. So we have this companion Tamim. A certain incident occurred where he met the Dajjal and he saw him, and then he came back and he told the Prophet about him. And then the Prophet ﷺ, after that, he began narrating this story that happened to Tamim from Tamim. So for example, the Prophet would narrate this story that happened to Tamim to the companions. And in this, there is proof of something in the science of Hadith, which is called Riwayatul Akabir an-Saghair. And what this means is narrating of the more prominent or the better sheikhs or the better narrators from the lower narrators. Meaning you'd have, for example, a teacher, a sheikh, and he has students, and then this student, something will happen to him, and his sheikh, who has no arrogance, he'll begin narrating this incident that happened to his student. So who is the akabir, who is the bigger one? The sheikh. So the sheikh is narrating an incident that occurred to his student. Now over here we have something that shows this, because we have the Prophet ﷺ, who has a higher and greater rank than Tamim ibn Aws, and we have the Prophet narrating this incident from Tamim. Right? So we have someone who has a higher status narrating an incident from someone who has a lower status. And this companion Tamim ibn Aws embraced Islam in the 9th year of the Hijrah. And his grandfather's name was ad-Dari ibn Hani. ad-Dari ibn Hani. That was the name of his grandfather. And only 18 hadith were narrated from this companion. And this is the only hadith that was narrated by both Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So there are 18 hadith narrated from this companion, and the only hadith that was narrated by both Al-Bukhari and Muslim is this hadith that we are mentioning right now. And he was a man who كان يكثر العبادة. He used to perform many acts of worship and many acts of obedience to Allah. It was mentioned about him that he would finish the whole Quran in one cycle, in one rak'ah. Subhanallah. And he was a person who used to cry often, and he was also among the zuhad, among the people who are detached from this life. And it was mentioned once about him that he came to verse 21 of Surah Al-Jathiyah. أَمْ حَسِبَ الَّذِينَ اجْتَرَحُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ أَن نَّجْعَلَهُمْ كَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. So he came to this verse and he kept on repeating it and crying until the subh came in. Subhanallah. He spent the whole night in prayer, the whole night repeating this verse. And it was also mentioned about him once that he came to another verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse 104, وَهُمْ فِيهَا كَانِحُونَ. And he kept repeating that until subh came in also. Subhanallah. May Allah raise his rank. And as we mentioned earlier, Tamim is the same person who narrated the story of the Dajjal and the Jassasa. And this is something that occurred to him before he embraced Islam. So before Tamim embraced Islam, he was with some people on a boat and the wind took them away and they were gone for 1 month on sea, subhanallah, on the waters, until they reached an island. And on this island they saw a dabba, an animal, something strange. And this dabba had extremely long hair on the front, on the back, and the back, to the point that you couldn't tell the front from the back, subhanallah. That is how much hair it had. So Tamim asked this animal, this thing, who it was, and it replied, Ana Jassasa, I am the Jassasa. And the Jassasa is the one who brings news to the Dajjal. Then this Jassasa showed them where the Dajjal was, and it was tied with chains, subhanallah. The Dajjal asked Tamim and the people with him some questions about the Prophet, about the appearance of the Prophet, and some other matters that he wanted to know about. So he asked them these questions, and after that they left. And then Tamim went to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet verified what Tamim said. The Prophet ﷺ called the companions and gathered them and told them what Tamim had told him. And know that the Prophet ﷺ had already informed the companions about the Jassasa and the Dajjal already. So he had already told them that there is something called the Jassasa and that there is something called a Dajjal. So when this incident happened to this companion Tamim, it made the Prophet ﷺ happy because it verified for the companions what they already knew. MashaAllah. And this companion had passed away in the year 40, in the 40th year after the Hijrah, in Palestine, in a city that is close to the city of Khalil, which is in Palestine. Radiyallahu anhu. And the last thing that I want to mention and share about this great companion, Tamim ibn Aus ad-Dari, is that the Prophet ﷺ praised him in a hadith, and he made dua for him in a very beautiful incident, mashallah. What had happened was that the companions in the city of Medina, when they were there, they used to pray the Maghrib and the Isha in darkness, because they didn't have the masajid like we have now, the mosques as in the states that they are with the lights, and how they're not built as they were in the past. So they used to pray in darkness, subhanallah. So what happened? This companion Tamim came and he brought some lights and he brought some lanterns and he put it around in the masjid. So when night fell, what happened? He turned them on. So the Prophet ﷺ, they went and they prayed their prayers, their night prayers, and then the Prophet came out and he saw the masjid illuminated. And when the Prophet ﷺ saw this, he was extremely happy of what happened and what this companion did. So he asked who did this, and they told him that it was Tamim. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, نَوَّرْتَ لَنَا مَسْجِدَنَا نَوَّرَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, which means that you illuminated our masjid for us. May Allah illuminate for you in this dunya and in the hereafter. MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Radiyallahu anhu. May Allah accept his deeds. And now continuing to the actual hadith that we are on, the Prophet ﷺ said, ad-Dīnu an-Nasihah. ad-Dīnu an-Nasihah, which means that the Nasihah is among the pillars of the religion. It is something important, it has a great significance, and it is something that should not be left out. That is the meaning of this hadith, or this part of this hadith. Ad-Dīnu Nasihah. The religion is Nasihah, meaning that an important part from the religion is the Nasihah. And insha'Allah ta'ala we will explain what Nasihah means. Nasihah means wanting good for the person that's being advised. So you're talking to an individual, you're advising him, and you sincerely want good for that person. This is what it means when you give a person a Nasihah. You are advising them and you want good for that person. And it comes from the word nusuh in the Arabic language, which means tasfiyah, which means like pure, to purify. You say in the Arabic language, nasahtul asal, right? It's from the same word nasiha, the noon, the sad, the ha. You'll notice that it's used here also, these same letters. You say nasahtul asal idha safaytahu, which means that you say about the honey that you made nusuh for it. What does this mean? It means that you purified the honey from any impurities. So when you are giving a person an advice, you are giving them a nasihah, you are trying to purify them from something which is not good for them. And you are doing this why? Because you want good for them, you want the khair, you want them to benefit. This is why you're giving that nasihah, that advice. And know that the nasihah, the advising, is something that keeps the religion strong. It strengthens the community, and it strengthens the love between the brothers and the love between the sisters. Right? This is something that strengthens the sisterhood and something that strengthens the brotherhood. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned a very beautiful story that illustrates the importance of the nasihah, of advising and talking and giving advice and guidance to our community, to our brothers and to our sisters. He said in the hadith, مَثَلُ الْقَائِمِ فِي حُدُودِ اللَّهِ وَالْوَاقِئِ فِيهَا, that the example of the people who are on the edge of falling into haram and the people who are falling into it, كَمَثَلِ قَوْمٍ اسْتَهَمُوا عَلَى سَفِينَةٍ, like a group of people who are stuck on a ship. You have a group of people who are stuck on a ship. فَأَصَابَ بَعْضُهُمْ أَعْلَاهَا وَبَعْضُهُمْ أَسْفَلَهَا. So some of them were on the top and some of them were on the bottom. فَكَانَ الَّذِي فِي أَسْفَلِهَا إِذَا اسْتَقَوْا مِنَ الْمَاءِ مَرُّوا عَلَى مَنْ فَوْقَهُمْ. And the people on the bottom, whenever they needed to get some water, they would go up to the deck and they would pass by their brothers above them. فَقَالُوا لَوْ أَنَّا خَرَقْنَا فِي نَصِيبِنَا خَرْقًا وَلَمْ نُؤْذِي مَنْ فَوْقَنَا. So they said to themselves, the people on the bottom, what if we made a hole in the bottom and we wouldn't have to go up? So we wouldn't have to go up and bother our brothers. Every time we need to get water, we have to go up and we have to bother them. So they said to themselves, what if we made a hole in the bottom? Subhanallah. فَإِن تَرَكُوهُمْ وَمَا أَرَادُوا هَلَكُوا وَهَلَكُوا جَمِيعًا. So if the people on top left them and they didn't advise them and they didn't talk to them, they would all be destroyed. The people on the top, if they knew about this and they just let them do what they want, they didn't give them the nasihah, they didn't give them any guidance, any advice, they would all be destroyed. وَإِنْ أَخَذُوا عَلَىٰ أَيْدِيهِمْ نَجَوْا وَنَجَوْا جَمِيعًا. But if they talked to them and they took them by their hands and they gave them the advice and the guidance, then they would all be saved. This is a very beautiful example of how advising each other is something that strengthens us and is something that leads us to prosperity and to safety. And know that the nasihah can be obligatory and it can be recommended. So we have the nasihatul wajibah, the obligatory advising, and you have the nasihah, the advising, which is recommended. Now the obligatory nasihah, it is something that we have to do and it is something that we should not neglect. And if we neglect and we leave out the obligatory nasihah, for example, correcting the mistakes and and pointing out the people of misguidance, this is something that's going to harm the community and it's only going to lead to calamities. It was mentioned in the hadith that was mentioned in the hadith by Imam Ahmad that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ النَّاسَ إِذَا رَأَوُا الْمُنْكَرَ فَلَمْ يُنْكِرُوا أَوْشَكَ أَنْ يَعُمَّهُمُ اللَّهُ بِعِقَابٍ. This means that if the people leave out ordering the good and forbidding the bad, they leave out the obligatory nasihah, أَوْشَكَ أَنْ يَعُمَّهُمُ اللَّهُ بِعِقَابٍ, that Allah Ta'ala, the Exalted, will send calamities to them because of them falling into this sin, because they are not ordering the good and forbidding the bad. So when you have these calamities in the Muslim Ummah, you have these unjust killings and these earthquakes and these natural disasters, and you have chaos and devastation happening to the Muslim Ummah, know that this is a result of the sins that we are falling into. And from the sins is leaving out and neglecting the obligatory nasihah, the obligatory advising. Know, brothers and sisters, that there are certain situations, certain times where we have to speak up and we have to correct the mistakes, we have to correct the misguidance, we have to point out the people of misguidance, the people who mislead the people in the religion. Now imagine, brothers and sisters, say there was an individual who used to cheat the people in selling. Say there was a person, he owned a store and he used to cheat the people. He used to sell them fake items and they never knew, and he used to lie to them and he used to cheat them. And imagine you used to go to this person, you used to go to the shop, you used to take your family there and you used to buy items from him. What would you say if I did not warn you about that individual? I knew about him, how he used to cheat the customers, but I did not warn you. What would you say about me? What would you think about me? If you found out later on that I knew that he used to cheat the people in the items, in his selling, and I did not warn you, how would you feel? Imagine that. How would you feel? You would feel very upset, and you wouldn't accept that from me. Now imagine there was a person, he never used to cheat you in buying and selling and transactions, but he used to cheat you in the religion. Imagine there was a person and he used to come to your house, he used to teach your children, he used to teach you and your family, but he used to teach you things that were not correct. He would teach you fabricated hadith, he would teach you things that are not true about the Prophet, he would say things about Allah that are not permissible to say. And this whole time I knew about this person that he was a liar, that he wasn't a real scholar, and he was leading you to mistakes. What would you say about me if I kept silent? Likewise, you'd be upset, you'd be frustrated. You'd say to me, how can you stay silent? You knew that he was a deviant, you knew that he used to make mistakes and he used to lie. Why didn't you warn me about him? Is that not so? And just as we do not accept for people to cheat us in our buying and selling, we do not accept for people to cheat us in the religion. If we know there's a person, he's selling fake items, we tell the Muslims. If we know there are individuals who are teaching the wrong information about the religion, we warn the people. This is part of the religion. This is the obligatory nasihah, the obligatory advising. And this is something that we all have to do, brothers and sisters. You know why? Because times are only getting worse. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, مَا مِن يَوْمٍ إِلَّا وَالَّذِي بَعْدَهُ شَرٌّ مِّنْهُ, that there will not be a day except that the day after it is worse than the day before it. Subhanallah. Now you look at the time in the past, you had the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then after the Prophet you had the companions, then you had the followers of the companions, you had the salaf, you had the khalaf, then you had other scholars, until you have what we have now. And you realize that it's been a gradual decline. Right? You have the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then you had the companions, and then the followers of the companions, and the salaf, and the khalaf, and the scholars, until you have what we have today. And you'll realize that every day, as the generations come, it only gets worse. Subhanallah. So you can realize from this that as the times get worse, we have to stick to our religion, and we have to stand up for it. And how does a person stand up for it? He does that in many ways, by teaching the obligations, by spreading the creed, by defending, by warning. Right? This is something that we have to do because times are only going to get worse. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in another hadith, يأتي زمان على أمتي يصير فيه المنكر معروفا والمعروف منكرا, that there will be a time in my nation in which the munkar, the bad, will be made to seem as good, and the good will be made to seem as bad. Allahu Akbar. So you can realize from this hadith that we as Muslims have to stand up for our religion. We have to correct the misconceptions, we have to warn, and we have to do the obligations. We have to give the nasihah that is wajibah, the nasihah that is obligatory. And in the continuation of the hadith that we are on, the Prophet ﷺ, after he said that the religion is the nasihah, that the important part of the religion is the nasihah, the companions said, liman? For who? Because they were thinking that the Prophet ﷺ was talking about advising. So they said, who is this advising for? If this religion, an important and integral part of it is the advising, the nasihah, who is this nasihah for? So the Prophet ﷺ, he answered them and he told them that the nasihah is لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم, that this nasihah is for Allah. Now what does it mean when we say that the nasihah is for Allah? Over here the word nasihah means to believe in Allah. So the Nasihah for Allah means to believe in Allah. And what does it mean to believe in Allah? It means to believe in Allah correctly, that He is one, He has no partner in His dominion, that He exists and He exists without a place. He is not attributed with the six directions because the six directions are attributes of the creations. To believe that Allah does not need anything because neediness is weakness. And weakness is imperfection, and Allah is not attributed with imperfection. And to believe that Allah Ta'ala does not change because change is the most apparent and significant sign of the creation. And to believe that Allah does not resemble any of His creation, because had He resembled the creation, He would have been attributed to what the creation is attributed with. For example, weakness, fatigue, hunger, and thirst. And this is imperfection, and the imperfect does not deserve to be worshipped. Try to understand and comprehend what I just said. If you're able to understand this, MashaAllah, hani'an laka, congratulations. We said that Allah does not resemble any of the creation, and this is proven logically by the sound mind. And what is the deduction? How do we understand that? Because had Allah resembled the creation, He would have been attributed to what the creation is attributed to. Why? Because creations that are similar to one another, they share characteristics. What does this mean? Say you have two people. You have a guy named Ahmed and a guy named Muhammad. So say for example I went to Ahmed and I punched him. And I wouldn't do this in real life, but say for example I went to him and I punched him and he started to feel pain. He starts screaming, "Oh, why did you punch me?" Do I have to go to Muhammad and punch him also to realize that he will feel pain? Do I have to do that? No. Why? Because they resemble each other. What is applicable to one is applicable to the other. So had Allah resembled the creation, the attributes of the creation such as weakness, fatigue, and pain, and death, and all these other things would have been applicable to Allah. And this does not befit Allah, because these are attributes of imperfection, and Allah is not attributed with these attributes. And believing in Allah also entails believing and knowing firmly that He is attributed with hearing and sight. And these are attributes that do not resemble the attribute of the creation. We say Allah Ta'ala, the Exalted, hears everything without the need of an ear or sound waves and vibrations as we hear, as the creation listens and hears. Or the creation, what do? How do they hear? They use an instrument, they use their ear. They listen by vibrations and whatnot. When we say Allah is attributed with hearing, it does not mean that He's attributed with an ear like the creation. No, of course it does not mean that. And we say Allah is attributed with sight, it doesn't mean that He's attributed with an eyeball like the creation. It doesn't mean that He sees with light as we see. This is the attribute of the creation. Allah sees everything without having to be physically there in that room or whatnot, and He sees everything without the need of light and without an instrument like an eyeball or a pupil or anything of that sort. Allah is attributed with sight, and His sight does not resemble that of the creation in any way whatsoever. And believing in Allah also entails knowing and believing that He is attributed with knowledge, and His knowledge does not increase and it does not decrease, and it's not like that of the creation. And believing in Allah also entails believing that He's attributed with speech, kalam. He's attributed with speech, and His speech does not resemble that of the creation. Allah Ta'ala, His speech is not consisting of letters or words or sounds or vocabulary like the attributes, like the creation does. When we want to speak, how do we speak? We speak with our lips and our tongues and with movement and vibrations, and we use instruments. Right? We speak with the language. Allah Ta'ala, He does not speak with the language. You don't say He speaks Arabic. Yes, the Quran was revealed in Arabic, but you don't say Allah speaks Arabic. You don't say Allah speaks English or French or any of these languages, because these are attributes of the creation. And His speech does not have a beginning and it does not have an end like all of His other attributes. And something to keep in mind of, when you have a hadith and it says that Allah says to an angel or an angel says to Allah, it doesn't mean that Allah speaks and His speech has a beginning and an end. Whenever you see a hadith like this, it means that Allah sends an angel to convey this message. So whenever you see a hadith or read a hadith in which it says Allah says this, it means that Allah ordered an angel and this order conveys this message. يعني فهمتم inshallah. This is very important to understand, because there are many hadiths out there where it says that Allah said to an angel this, or an angel said to Allah. What does it mean? It means that Allah Ta'ala ordered an angel, and this angel conveys this message that Allah Ta'ala revealed to this angel. It doesn't mean that Allah's speech has a beginning and has an end. This is very important to understand. And an example of this is the very famous hadith, Hadith al-Nuzul, the hadith of dissension. And if you want to take the meaning of it, the hadith about dissension. Now, what is this hadith? It's very famous, it's very popular. It's the hadith in which they encourage others to stand up at night, to wake up at night in the last third of the night. And yes, waking up at night in the last third is very recommended. It is something good, and it is something that all of us should strive to do, to wake up in the last third of the night and to make dua. Now, why is this important to do? Because it was mentioned in a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said to us and taught us that in the last third of the night, that there is an angel that descends down to the skies, and it asks, who is out there making dua? Allah will answer their dua. Who is out there making istighfar, asking for forgiveness, that Allah will forgive them? An angel descends and says this. Now, some people, they take this hadith literally, and they said that Allah descends to the skies. So instead of saying that an angel descends, they interpreted it and they said that Allah descends. Now, movement and stillness and harakah, these are attributes of the creation. Subhanallah. Didn't we say at the beginning, to believe in Allah means to believe and to know firmly that He is not attributed with any of the attributes of the creation. So over here you have a hadith, and people, they take it literally and they take it out of context, and they attribute movement to Allah. And movement is an attribute of the creation. So what is the meaning of this hadith? The meaning of this hadith is that Allah orders an angel to descend to the skies, and an angel says these words. It's not that Allah descends and Allah speaks. No, a'udhu billah. It does not mean that. So this is a very good example of a hadith in which people, they misinterpret and they misunderstand, and this leads them to falling into blasphemy. Why? Because they are attributing the creation to Allah. And had they used their mind and the sound mind, they would have realized that this hadith should not be taken literally, because it leads to corruption, it leads to fasad. And you're attributing an attribute of the creation to Allah, and this is not permissible to do. So in the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ said that the Nasihah is to Allah, he meant that from the Nasihah is to believe in Allah. And what does it mean to believe in Allah? To believe in Allah correctly. And we touched on a few points. So these are a few points, and of course it encompasses more, ya ahbabana. Right? We just touched on a few points. Those who want to learn more about the attributes of Allah and what it means to believe in Allah properly, there are many resources. They can go, for example, to a very beneficial website out there, obligatoryknowledge.com. There are lessons that deal about these attributes, and they clarify it very eloquently and they articulate very nicely. So those who want to learn more about the Nasihah to Allah, which is to believe in Allah, they can go to this resource, and there are other resources, and this is one that I recommend personally. And the next thing the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith is وَلِكِتَابِهِ, the Nasihah for the Kitab, for the Quran. And what does this entail? What does it mean, the Nasihah to the Quran? It means to believe in the Quran. To believe in the Quran, that it is the book that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, that it has no mistakes in it. To believe in this book, and to believe in all the other books that were sent to the other prophets. May Allah raise their ranks. And this also entails glorifying the Quran, and honoring it, and treating it with respect, and not doing anything that would be considered to belittle the Quran or to mock it. There are some individuals, whenever they get angry, they take the Quran and they insult it. There are some people, they take the Quran and they throw it at the wall when they're angry. Subhanallah. Really, there are individuals like that. I know one person, this is what they used to do when they used to get angry. They would get angry at a family member or whatever it would be. They would take the Quran and they would throw it. Subhanallah. And then you see this Quran, when you look at the shape of it, how it is, you see that it's wrecked and it's torn, and it's not in a condition that was in a good state. The papers are falling out, and you can see there was a lot of war and torn on it, like someone was hitting it or something. Someone was doing something bad to it. May Allah protect us. So we need to respect the Quran, and doing something like this, for example, throwing it and insulting it and getting mad at it, it is something blasphemous and takes a person out of the religion of Islam, because he is belittling the Quran when they do stuff like this. And inshallah, we will stop here. I ask Allah to forgive us of our sins and to grant us the sincere intentions and to make us among the pious people. Barakallahu fikum. Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Make dua for us. Continue to spread these lessons. Invite your friends, your family members, your colleagues, friends at school, wherever it is, inshallah. And make dua for us, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum, ahsanallahu ilaykum. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you liked it, check out the rest of our series. And donate for the sake of Allah so that we may continue spreading the obligatory knowledge to Muslims all over the world. Barakallahu fikum. May Allah accept your deeds.